What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Our 2 cents with Chris and Gerry. Don't adjust your sets. New coat of paint. We decided to keep this thing going. Thanks to you guys, the fans, the viewers. You were watching a lot of Sports Foreign TV over the last few years. You know, it was a great little project that we had started, of course, during the pandemic. We let it run for a while. The feedback was phenomenal. So I said, you know what? Let's solidify this thing. Let's get it a better name. Let's get some new colors. Let's change the logo, but let's keep the same flow we've always ran. Chris Dobson with me as always, Gerry Green. Gerry, great to see you, brother. I hadn't seen you in a while. I hope you had a wonderful summer. It's great to see you. Let's get this thing started. But before that, let's talk about it a little bit. Did you get some golf in this summer?
Lots of golf, Chris. The weather was a little wet throughout the whole season, but overall, it's great to see you again. It's great to get back and start talk sports again. And what a pile of sports we got to talk about.
You're absolutely right. And we're going to do just that. We're going to start right here like we always did back in the day. One of my favorite things, of course, the QMJHL. Right here in my own backyard, the Moncton Wildcats are, some news coming out of Moncton specifically, of course. The big news was last week they've decided to pull their bid for the 2025 Memorial Cup. It was an interesting thing to see. A little sad to see here. I know a lot of fans were looking forward to it. My thoughts on the whole thing are this: not surprised, to be honest with you. I knew there was no chance they were going to allow it to be 3 times in a row in the Maritimes. I knew they weren't going to let it go Halifax, St. John, Moncton. It's unfortunate, but hey, don't forget, Gerry, there's always 2 ways into a Memorial Cup. You could go in as the host, or you could kick down the front door and let yourself in. So either way, I'm rooting for them to do that. They are going to have a good squad this year, and that's where I want to start. I want to talk about the Moncton Wildcats, specifically the St. John Sea Dogs and the Acadie Bathurst Titan, because, of course, out of the 3 of them, the only one really making some splashes is Moncton, which they were poised to do. They won the draft lottery. They had that first overall pick with Caleb Desnoyers, Elliot Desnoyers' brother, joining the roster this year. Team looks really good. Have you had a chance to catch any of the action so far? Have you seen much going on, or do you share the same thoughts I did?
No, as always, Chris, I watch very closely to see what the Moncton Wildcats are doing, and they seem to have got off on the right spot, on the right foot, and they seem to have gone off the right foot defensively. They're doing very well that way. And having said that, Jan Loshing is second in scoring in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, heading into action tonight, of which the Wildcats are hosting Baie-Comeau. And there you have, or Drummondville rather, there you have Moncton and Baie-Comeau and Halifax, really the top 3 teams thus far, getting off, if you would, on the right foot. Now, St. John and Bathurst, especially St. John, is really rebuilding and moving towards that. And Bathurst, it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on. I thought they would have some ingredients coming back that would maybe not have them in the cellar. But right now, it's really so early, Chris. We'll see what will happen. But off the top, it looks like Halifax is tooled properly, and it certainly looks like Moncton's done their homework.
Right. And of course, don't forget, going into this season, the Moncton Wildcats weren't poised to be the contender this year. All things were pointing to next year being the year. But again, now that they're pulling that Memorial Cup bid for next year, here's a better question for you. What do? Do you change the way the structure looks? I mean, your team's decent right now with a couple moves. Could you build the front and go in and try to win yourselves a title this year? Or do you think you stay the course and do you keep trying to push for next year as a Q champion?
Well, Chris, just down the highway, you've seen the recipe work to perfection for the St. John Sea Dogs. And I hate to reference the fact that they've won 2 Memorial Cups and how much that must be a burr in the saddle of Mr. Irving. But it is simple. The formula is simple. You have to be patient. You have to build. And when the time's right, you add the right ingredients. Is this year, it's still early to tell, is this year the year? I don't know. I think you start with a good starting goaltender, which they have in Steinman. Is he poised for that bright light yet? Not sure. But maybe the next couple months will tell as we get into the Christmas break. But patience is a virtue, and patience can pay off when it comes to building a championship in Major Junior Hockey.
Okay, before we move on, I just want to ask you one more quick thing, and that is, outside of Halifax and potentially Moncton, I mean, who are the favorites? Who should people be watching for this year? I mean, outside of the Maritime Division, is there a Quebec team that people should be interested in?
Well, it is coming out of Baie-Comeau. There's a lot of noise coming out of Baie-Comeau, and Val-d'Or's off to a great start too. But your teams, again, Chris, we know how secular that the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League can be. Those teams like Quebec and Gatineau and Victoriaville, who are riding high last year, are rebuilding this year. And of course, Patrick Roy has left the Quebec Rampart, whether or not that's the big difference or not. But again, you'll see other teams that are going to be coming forward and taking the reins that have built their teams as they've done through the draft because they were down in the standings. And that's what's happening again. So it's always exciting for each of the communities to have the opportunity to vie for a championship or have a winning season after having bad seasons. That's what junior hockey is all about.
Okay, well, let's stick with hockey, but change leagues. Of course, big news this week. The start of the regular season of the National Hockey League is underway. Opening night, NHL media dream. You've got Connor Bedard versus Cole Harper, Sidney Crosby. It looked like Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks got the last laugh. I love, I was a little bitter. I'll be the first guy to say it. When the Blackhawks were awarded with the draft lottery and the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, I was rattled about it. I wasn't even very quiet about it. I was pretty vocal about it. But overall, looking at how the Chicago Blackhawks retooled that team, I love the Taylor Hall signing. I love bringing Corey Perry in to help that. Although now that Corey Perry's there, I think Connor Bedard can kiss the Stanley Cup goodbye. Corey Perry, that's how you know they're going to lose. Anywhere Corey Perry goes, they can't win. But overall, I love the tooling. I think, Chicago's built themselves on a solid platform. If you look at the news that came out of that camp throughout the summer, of course, last year was Patrick Kane moving on. This summer, of course, Jonathan Toews no longer being there. I mean, it's a lot of noise, but it turns out that with Connor Bedard, it's just background noise. But overall, I think it's a great way to kick off the National Hockey League.
Yeah, the intensity level of the Blackhawks is going to be enhanced by the exposure they're going to get each and every night when they go to a city with Bedard in tow.
Right.
Because, it's just going to, the whole atmosphere in the rink, the attendance at all the rinks will be there to see him. So you're going to want to perform. So it's going to make them all perform at their best, where probably last year, the Blackhawks are in town, don't show up, don't need to show up, aren't watching that closely. But with the talent that you have in Connor Bedard, he's up the ante for the Blackhawks, which is going to make all of them play better. And yes, they've done a good job of putting some veteran, knowledgeable guys around the rookie and around a relatively young team too. And so the sky's the limit to them. Now, don't get carried away whether or not they'll make the playoffs or not. I doubt that. Right. But it certainly will be entertaining every night the Blackhawks get a chance to play on national TV.
So looking at the Canadian teams going into it, I mean, we don't need to go into detail on it, but I just kind of want to look at the Canadian teams in the league this year, see if we're happy with what's going on, what our thoughts are, what our predictions are. And we're going to start on the West Coast, of course, with the Vancouver Canucks. What do you think is going to happen out of there? I mean, there's some you hear about all the rumblings. There's been a lot of unhappy things happening in Vancouver all last year, coming into it this season, everyone hit the reset button. What do you think? What are your expectations there?
This is what I wrote down, Chris, when we discussed this was going to be one of our topics. I used words as descriptive of the seasons ahead for these teams. I had Vancouver, the word hope. They hope to be better and hope things they deserve things to be better in Vancouver. Let's start there. We work into Alberta. There is pressure in Calgary. There's pressure in Edmonton. There's pressure in Calgary after the big trade and Huberdeau not having a great season last year and what the expectations were there. So there's pressure there. And of course, there's always pressure in Edmonton when you've got the best hockey player in the world playing on your team. Okay? There's pressure there. In Winnipeg, I don't know, Chris. That's not a word I know. It's not a one descriptive word. I just don't know what's going on in Winnipeg. And to kind of segue into one of our subjects that we're going to talk about in regards to Scheifele and Hellebuck being assigned to identical 7-year contracts, this is my prediction on that, Chris. I would think in the very near future, they're going to be traded. And thus, the person the team that Winnipeg's going to trade them to is going to know exactly what they're getting and how much it's going to cost them, rather than signing Scheifele and Scheifele saying, I want 10 years and $9 million a year. Okay, so I think that is a factor. The Jets are going to get something back this time. And I think both parties, Scheifele and Hellebuck, and the Jets have agreed on this. I really have an instinct that might be something, because I can't see Scheifele and Hellebuck wanting to stay or going to stay in Winnipeg for 5, 6, 7 years. Don't see it happening. Pressure also is the word when I talk about Toronto. Of course, Toronto's got to be one of the top teams in the East, Chris. Pressure again, whether or not they put the right pieces in the right place again, that, square peg and round hole, that's always the case in Toronto. Fun is the word I'm going to say for Ottawa. Ottawa is going to be a fun place to be, fun team to watch. And of course, building in Montreal, and I don't know what the blocks that they have together and how successful their season could be.
Oof, that's a lot to digest. Love the breakdown though, and there's a lot of things I fully agree with you on that. From my point of view, you nailed the Winnipeg side of things. The Calgary side of things, what I'm excited to see is a more set, determined role. Of course, with the coaching change in Calgary, you're probably going to see Jacob Pelche, new number change in Calgary, went to 22 instead of 49.
Yes.
You're going to see the resurgence of Jonathan Huberdeau, I think, this year with a new coaching change. Hopefully the locker room changes. I love Ottawa. I think they're going to be a team, again, in regards to being a playoff team last year, they weren't there. They're going to take a step forward. I think the Ottawa Senators are going to be fun to watch. Toronto, to me, is very pressure. I think that's the word I'm looking for. After that one series win. Now, again, GM change in Toronto. You got Brad Treliving coming on in. I absolutely, and I hate to say this, but I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be one hell of a hockey team this year. By bringing in Tyler Bertuzzi, Ryan Reeves, Max Domi, these are the kinds of grit that the Toronto Maple Leafs were lacking. I mean, they had it in Wayne Simmons last year, but it was a little too old of a situation to get the ice time in. But I think you're going to see some big things. Goaltending to me in Toronto is the big question mark. Regarding the Montreal Canadiens,
as always, say.
Yeah. Right. And that's it. Regarding the Montreal Canadiens, I'll keep this short and sweet. And that is, I'm hoping if Caulfield can stay healthy, it could be our first 40-goal scorer since Vinny Domfus. I'm hoping to see Slavkovsky with a huge sophomore season. We need something better out of him. And arguably, I'm hoping, and my prediction is that the Habs will finish not in the playoffs. They won't make the playoffs this year. I'm hoping they finish 15 points higher than they finished last year. Just show some progress. I mean, again, goaltending is going to be another question mark for me. How long will Jake Allen be there? I don't know. I do love the prospects pool. It was so tough to see, between Marty St. Louis and the management staff have to decide who goes where. But overall, Laval's going to be stacked. Montreal's going to look good. That's my thoughts on that. But overall, loved your opinions.
So Toronto, Chris.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I'm thinking Toronto is still one of your top 3 teams in the East. The fact that Boston loses Bergeron and Krejci is a big advantage for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, whether the Bruins can retool enough to even challenge for the Atlantic Division Championship, I don't know. Tampa's going to take a step back, perhaps, but Tampa is so very unpredictable. But the team to watch, New Jersey, and I think Carolina. Carolina's retooled a little bit by adding some grit of bunting, and they put that defenseman from Boston, the Russian. Anyways, I can't think of his name at the moment. But they've done enough things to enhance already a good team. And New Jersey, look up and down their lineup after signing Timo Meier, and all the ingredients they already had, including the Hugheses that are now both going to be playing for New Jersey. That's going to be a fun team to watch. And very strictly, Colorado, Vegas, and Dallas in the West. And I don't know what else can happen out West besides those 3 teams.
Sleeper team, sleeper pick for me. Don't sleep on Columbus. I think Columbus is going to do all right this year too. Again, maybe not be. People kind of sit down on the side of things. I just don't sleep on them. I've got a good feeling about it. But overall, do you think Vegas can repeat?
No, definitely not.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Let's move on to Major League Baseball because we're going to start, of course, in Canada. We got to talk about the disappointment that was the Toronto Blue Jays. And I know I told you this before the show. It's a sad day in reality when the Boston Red Sox were the only team in the AL East to win a game in October, and they finished 3 or 4 games below 500. But overall, how disappointing is this? Where do the Jays go from here? The whole concept of throwing everybody under the bus for that Barrios decision to pull him after he was pitching and dialed in. Where do the Jays go from here? What do they have to do?
The 2 games versus Minnesota were a microcosm of their whole season, of which the ability to pitch well and play good defense but not getting, this is the key, Chris, timely hits. Not just hits, home runs, whatever they might be. It was hits with runners in scoring position. It was harped upon the whole season, 160 whole 2 games with Buck and Dan about every time that statistic was a part of the outcome of a game for the Toronto Blue Jays, whether or not they could knock runs in scoring positions, runners in scoring position. And it certainly happened against Minnesota very easily. And the whole Barrios thing was very disturbing to me that again, I remember back when Snell was pitching for Tampa and Cash went out and pulled him out in an important game. Same sort of thing. Their analytics type of thing in Tampa was transposed into Toronto, and how Snyder couldn't look out there and think, my guy, he's pitching. And Barrios can be hot or cold, Chris, but he was hot that day. And that's just so terrible. The American League East is now not a beast. They're a beast in the regular season. They're certainly not a beast in the postseason. Tampa's on the sidelines. Baltimore's on the sidelines. Blue Jays are on the sidelines, all from the American League East. Who do you have, Chris, that's remaining that you think can go all the way?
Big fan of Texas right now. I'm absolutely, I think, I watched the Eovaldi pitch even this week, and just watching the way, plus don't forget Max Scherzer's, I saw the interview with him. He's ready to come back and pitch too. I was a little shocked to see the Dodgers on the ropes. But yeah, right now I'm riding Texas, and if everything goes well, it looks like Texas is going to play Houston. I can't stand the Astros, so I'm rooting hard on the Texas side of things. But this whole Blue Jays side of things, before we move on, you know what this reeks of? Do you remember a few years back, again, when the Jays were still constant contenders, when they went back into, when they had R.A. Dickey on the mound, who was pitching a great game in the postseason, and he was pulled as well. And, when he was pulled to bring in, oh my goodness, it was David. They had him in the bullpen instead of the starting lineup. Boston, why am I drawing a blank here? Anyways, they pulled him on in, and a lot of the fans got very upset because R.A. Dickey was also pitching a gem. This reeked of that, and then the Jays got pumped in the later rounds from the reliever side of things. So overall, but you're right. The biggest thing I want to talk about is the play at second base with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The pickoff that was there, to me, will go down. No, I have to. It will go down. It's inexcusable. And I know it's been beaten to death in the media, and I know that this is not something that, it's not new news, but at the same time, that can happen. That was the turning point for me. A lot of people blame Bo Bichette the night before for the base running error. At least he was making the attempt. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. getting picked off at second base when your team has scored one run in 18 innings, when you have runners at second and third, and Bo had earned himself into a full count setup, inexcusable. Anyways, I want to get that rant in, figure it out. I don't know what you go from here, but yes, from the pitching side, where do you have them? Who do you think is?
Well, God bless Atlanta. I thought they were a team that couldn't be beat, but Philadelphia seems like a team on a mission, just like they were last year. They get in a groove, and this is what I'm relating to, is teams that have found their mojo in October, and Philadelphia is one of them, and Texas is the other one, Chris. Arizona, I think, is going to knock off LA, and I think that's going to be their World Series, beating the Dodgers. I think Philly will take care of Arizona. You're going to have Philly and Texas to take care of Houston in the American League Championship. And then I think Philadelphia is going to get the championship that they've been looking for and that their ravenous fans like to have. But I feel sorry for a team like Atlanta, which, again, has a tremendous regular season, tremendous individual performances from many players. And it looks like they are stumbling again in the playoffs, just like they did last year against Philadelphia.
That being said, so you're taking the Phillies. The Phillies are your World Series team. That's who you're going with?
That's who I'm going with.
All right, I love it. I'm going to take Texas. All right, let's move on to the NFL, Gerry. I wanted, because we've got a lot to unpackage here in a short period of time, but looking at how things have gone so far, the Niners and the Eagles looking like they're at the cream of the crop. But is this just false hope for Niners fans? Because I think they've been here before and they're trying to figure this out. But overall, is anyone in that class, is anyone going to, I'm not going to say, I have a hard time believing both these teams are going to go undefeated. But at the same time, it's a situation where, they look so good early. Where do we go from here? And can anyone be in that top tier?
Chris, like how I like to delve into numbers and statistics and everything. And both of those teams you just referenced are both from the NFC, and they're both 5-0. you look at Philadelphia's schedule. They beat New England, they beat Minnesota, they beat Tampa, and they beat Washington in overtime. Now, is that something you pin a badge on your chest about? Should beat those teams. And the schedule's bound to get tougher. San Francisco, the same thing. But San Francisco crowns their particular 5-0 run with a hammering of the Dallas Cowboys in what was classified as what was going to be a marquee game for the week, and it wasn't even close. And the Dallas Cowboys do that many times, Chris. They get put on this pedestal like they're one of these teams that's going to be a contender every year, and they never are. They never are. And San Francisco and the other team that I find that plays and hits really hard, and I'm going to reference them from the NFC, is the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions beat Kansas City, if you remember, on opening night, Jason. And they are another team that hits and plays hard. You watch that San Francisco defense, Chris, and they are vicious. They're a vicious defense that are playing hard all over the field, and they've got a quarterback in Purdy that's confident. Detroit has a quarterback in Goff that's confident. And what the thing is, like, it seems like with Detroit, you can expect anything from them, and they have nothing to lose. And that's a dangerous team for anybody to play. But I think they've got the ability to be a contender as well. And you throw, Kansas City, Miami, and Buffalo. Let me just say something about Buffalo. I think Buffalo got a raw deal having to go to London and play Jacksonville, who had been there for 2 weeks, and land there and play them in a big game. Every game for Buffalo is a big game. And to send them to London, I didn't think was fair. But I think those are your 6 teams, including Detroit, that are off to good starts, and teams that could really be at a higher level than anybody else in the NFL.
I'm glad you mentioned Detroit, because watching Jared Goff do what he's done, it's been a lot of fun to see. But now, I want to talk about a quarterback who at this point should have come into the season with hopefully better confidence. What is going on with Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos? What an absolute disaster. I mean, talk about not just dumpster fire is a good word for it. If I'm a Broncos fan, I would be furious. I would just I'd pack it in. I'd be like, I'm out. I can't deal with this anymore. Between Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, what has to happen there? I mean, it's a fire. It's a fire.
Do you think did you think it was going to change, Chris? And the problem here is whether Wilson is able to play quarterback or not, how often is he getting on the field? With the way that defense plays, the offense from the other team spends a lot of time on the field beating the tar out of the Denver defense. So it's got to start there. You can pin yes a little bit on Wilson. I don't know if Wilson's turning the ball over or anything, but the defense in Denver is pathetic. 70 pinned up against them against Miami, which is another good team in the AFC.
Well, I would have to think at this point he's lost the room. There's no way his players still love playing for him. You talk about it's absolutely horrendous. You asked me if I was expecting anything different. No, I wasn't. I was expecting things not to get any worse, and boy, was I wrong. But overall, at the end of the day, if I was a Broncos fan, I would just be like, you know what? I'll come back next season to see if we can't figure out. It has not been very fun to watch at all, and I actually feel for Broncos fans. And it's time for a new segment. We're going to call it The Atlantic Scene with Gerry Green. Gerry, hit us with the news.
That's very rhythmic, Chris. And of course, in New Brunswick, the New Brunswick Senior Baseball League finally came to an end, Chris, and it's a PEI team that wins the championship. The PEI Islanders beat the Fredericton Royals in Game 6 to claim the championship. It's their second in 3 years. The St. John Alpines, who got knocked out early, were the defending champions. So we here at our 2 cents tip our hats to the PEI Islanders, New Brunswick Senior Baseball Championship, with their championship this year. MHL news, Chris, for you. It's underway. The MHL is off and running, and 2 New Brunswick teams find themselves in the top 20 of the CJAHL, say that quick, standings, as the Miramichi Timberwolves and the Edmonton Blizzard are off to a great start, sitting on top of the Northern Division standings. News this week, Chris, or this year, the West Kent Steamers, who were formerly the South Shore Lumberjacks, are now in West Kent, playing in Bucktouche, off to a great start in front of big fans. They're in the Northern Division, and now the Summerside Western Islanders have moved to the South. That's news from the MHL.
Absolutely love it. You caught the local side of things here, but now you've waited all show for it. Now it's time to close this thing off with what we're calling our 2 cents, where we're going to fire off a topic that we're passionate about, that we have opinions about, and that's how we're going to close things. I'm going to start, of course, and in my opinion, my 2 cents is this, and that is Indianapolis Colts fans need to relax. Yes, I understand Anthony Richardson going down for the fourth time, not finishing 4 out of 5 football games that he has started in due to injuries. Last one's a big one, though. It looks like a grade 3 AC sprain. It's going to keep him on the sideline and the shoulder for 4 to 8 weeks at this point. Everybody's talking about him being a bust because of all the news that happened with, of course, Andrew Luck when he got drafted. Look, guys, this is not a time to panic. We've got arguably the best backup in the league with Gardner Minshew. We just need to figure out, look, with Shane Steichen holding this offense, Colts fans need to relax. Everything's going to be fine. Anthony Richardson's going to figure out how to take these hits in the NFL. It's not the O-line's fault, so stop trying to compare him to Andrew Luck. This is not what's going on. Everything's going to be fine. Colts are 3-2 going into the weekend with another big divisional game against Trevor Lawrence, the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's going to be a huge one. Let's see if Gardner Minshew can, keep his role intact. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Wait, Gerry, I can't wait to hear yours.
Chris, I got 2 subjects in my 2 cents. One of them is from Major League Baseball. What a great year I had watching baseball this year. And you know why? It was called the pitch clock. The pitch clock made baseball so much more fun for me this year. And not only did I kind of shrug when they said they were going to make the bases bigger, Chris, I didn't mind it at all. It created more offense. And look at Asuna, who had 70-plus stolen bases for the Atlanta Braves. It made the game more fun. It opened up the defense. It made it more offensive. That's what I'm there to watch baseball for. I want offense, and I want it in 2.5 hours. Meanwhile, Chris, did you know it doesn't exist? There doesn't exist a kickoff return in the NFL. You watch an NFL game, the kickoff is into the end zone, off the back wall. Nobody gets to run back a kickoff anymore. I miss it. They call it special teams. Special teams are supposed to be out there working the kickoff, and it's exciting play that doesn't exist in the NFL. I want them to move the kickoff back to the 25-yard line. They'll catch it at the goal line and run it out. That's what I'm looking forward to if the NFL would adapt it. I'm tired of no kickoff returns. That's our 2 cents, our debut show. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you next week here on Rogers